Learn English through stories. The United States story. From the beginnings to modern history. Indigenous peoples and their cultures. Long before Europeans came, Native Americans lived all across the land we now call the United States. They had many different cultures, languages, and ways of life. Some, like the Iroquois in the Northeast, built strong communities and systems of government. Others, like the Navajo in the Southwest, created beautiful art and lived close to nature. On the Great Plains, tribes like the Lakota followed buffalo herds for food and clothing. Native Americans lived on this land for thousands of years, shaping it with their traditions and knowledge. The arrival of European explorers. In 1492, Christopher Columbus arrived in the Americas while looking for a faster route to Asia. After his voyage, other European explorers came to North America. Spain wanted gold, France wanted to trade fur, and England wanted land. Their arrival changed the Americas forever. Europeans brought new goods like horses, but they also brought diseases that hurt Native American communities. These first explorers began a new chapter in history, one full of opportunity, but also conflict. The founding of the 13 colonies. By the early 1600s, England had started building colonies along the eastern coast of North America. The first successful colony was Jamestown in Virginia, founded in 1607. Life there was hard because of disease and hunger. In 1620, a group of pilgrims looking for religious freedom landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Over time, 13 colonies were created. These colonies became busy with farming, fishing, and trade, and they would later become the foundation of the United States. The transatlantic trade and slavery. During this time, a terrible system called the transatlantic slave trade began. Europeans took millions of Africans from their homes and brought them to the Americas. Many were forced to work on farms in the southern colonies. This made the colonies richer, but it caused great pain and injustice. Slavery became a big part of the economy in the South, but it also created problems and divisions that would last for many years. The American Revolution. In the 1700s, the colonies grew tired of British control. They had to pay high taxes, but they had no say in British government. This made them angry, and they began to ask for independence. In 1775, the colonies and Britain went to war. Leaders like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson helped guide the colonies. In 1776, the colonies wrote the Declaration of Independence, saying they were a free country. After years of fighting, the colonies won the war in 1783 and became the United States of America. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights. After the war, the United States needed a strong plan for its government. In 1787, leaders from the states met to write the Constitution. This document created rules for the government and made sure it would protect the rights of the people. Later, the Bill of Rights was added. These are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and they guarantee important freedoms like the right to free speech and religion. The Constitution became the foundation of the U.S. government and has lasted for over 200 years. Westward expansion. Manifest destiny. In the 1800s, many Americans believed it was their destiny to move west and settle all the land to the Pacific Ocean. This idea was called manifest destiny. People moved west to find new opportunities and land for farming. In 1803, the U.S. bought a huge amount of land from France, called the Louisiana Purchase. But this expansion caused problems for Native Americans, who were forced to leave their lands. The westward movement shaped the U.S., but it also brought many conflicts. The War of 1812. The War of 1812 was a second war between the United States and Britain. Britain was stopping American trade and forcing American sailors to work for them. The U.S. fought back to protect its independence. During the war, the British burned Washington, D.C., but the U.S. eventually defended itself. The war ended in 1815, and it helped Americans feel more united and proud of their country. Slavery and sectional tensions. As the U.S. grew, so did arguments about slavery. The North wanted to end slavery, but the South depended on it for their farms and economy. These arguments created a lot of tension between the two regions. People in the North and South had different ideas about how the country should move forward. This tension would soon lead to one of the darkest times in American history: the Civil War and abolition of slavery. In 1861, the tension between the North and the South led to the Civil War. The North, or the Union, wanted to keep the country together and end slavery. The South, or the Confederacy, wanted to leave the U.S. to keep slavery. The war lasted for years and was very bloody. In the end, the Union won, and slavery was abolished in 1865. But the country was left deeply divided, and the struggles for equality were far from over. Reconstruction and the fight for equality. After the Civil War ended in 1865, the United States entered a period called Reconstruction. The government worked to rebuild the South and help millions of newly freed African Americans start new lives. Amendments were added to the Constitution to give African Americans citizenship and the right to vote. However, this time was not easy. Many in the South resisted these changes, creating laws and groups that worked against equality. Reconstruction ended in 1877. And while progress was made, the fight for civil rights was far from over. The Industrial Revolution and immigration. In the late 1800s, the U.S. experienced a time of rapid growth called the Industrial Revolution. Factories, railroads, and new inventions changed the way people lived and worked. Millions of immigrants from Europe and Asia came to the U.S. to find jobs and a better life. Cities grew quickly, becoming centers of industry and culture. However, many workers, including children, worked long hours in dangerous conditions. Over time, labor unions formed to fight for workers' rights, helping to improve conditions for many people. The Gilded Age and social change. The late 1800s was also called the Gilded Age, a time of great wealth for some but poverty for many. Powerful businessmen like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller made fortunes in industries like steel and oil. However, most workers lived in crowded cities and struggled to make a living. This period also saw the rise of movements to improve society. Women began fighting for the right to vote, and reformers worked to help the poor and protect workers. These changes started to shape a more modern and fair United States. World War I and America's role. In 1914, World War I began in Europe, but the U.S. stayed neutral at first. However, in 1917, after German submarines attacked American ships, the U.S. joined the war. American soldiers, called doughboys, helped the Allies win the war in 1918. After the war, the U.S. became a global power, but many Americans wanted to focus on their own country. This led to a period of isolation, where the U.S. tried to stay out of foreign conflicts. The Great Depression. The 1920s were a time of economic growth, called the Roaring Twenties, but this ended suddenly with the stock market crash in 1929. The crash caused the Great Depression, the worst economic crisis in U.S. history. Millions of people lost their jobs, homes, and savings. Families stood in long lines for food, and many farmers lost their land. President Franklin D. Roosevelt introduced the New Deal, a series of programs to help people and rebuild the economy. While the Depression lasted many years, it taught Americans the importance of helping each other in hard times. World War II and the Greatest Generation. In 1939, World War II began in Europe and Asia. At first, the U.S. stayed neutral, but in 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, a U.S. naval base in Hawaii. This brought the U.S. into the war. American soldiers fought in Europe, Africa, and the Pacific, while people at home supported the war effort by working in factories and saving resources. In 1945, the Allies defeated Nazi Germany and Japan. The war ended with the U.S. as a superpower and with hopes for a more peaceful world. The Civil Rights Movement. In the 1950s and 1960s, African Americans led the fight for civil rights to end segregation and racism. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X inspired millions to stand up for equality. They organized protests, marches, and speeches to demand change. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 were major victories, ending many forms of discrimination. However, the fight for racial justice continues today, reminding us of the power of courage and unity. The Cold War and the space race. After World War II, the US and the Soviet Union became rivals in a period called the Cold War. This was not a traditional war, but a competition between two powerful nations. They competed in areas like technology, military power, and influence around the world. In 1969, the US achieved a major victory in the space race when astronaut Neil Armstrong became the first person to walk on the moon. The Cold War ended in 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed, leaving the US as the world's leading superpower. The rise of modern America. From the 1980s to today, the US has continued to grow and change. Technology like personal computers, the internet, and smartphones has transformed how people live and work. The US has faced challenges such as wars in the Middle East, economic recessions, and debates over immigration and climate change. However, it has also made progress in areas like science, equality, and innovation. Modern America is a mix of cultures, ideas, and dreams, shaped by its past and looking forward to the future. A future full of dreams. The story of the United States is not just about its past, it's about its future. From a land of Native American cultures to a nation built by people from all over the world, the U.S. is a place of resilience, innovation, and endless possibilities. The country has faced great challenges, wars, injustice, and division, but each time it has risen stronger, guided by the ideals of freedom, equality, and hope. Today, the United States continues to inspire. It is a land where science reaches for the stars, where voices demand justice, and where people dream of building a better tomorrow. With each generation, new ideas are born, and the promise of opportunity is renewed. The future of America is written by its people, by their courage to face challenges, their creativity to solve problems, and their determination to leave the world better than they found it. As long as there are dreams to chase and people willing to chase them, the story of the United States will continue to shine bright, offering hope not just to its citizens, but to the entire world. The story of the United States is one of courage, innovation, and endless possibilities. From the first settlers to the modern era, history has shaped this nation into what it is today. But remember, history is still being written, and the future belongs to those who dare to dream. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. Thank you for watching.